Hi, everyone. And if you're not here, we're having a PhD town hall for the Cinema Media Studies program. We just had our first announcement, which was that Janine Marchessault will be taking over as the PhD GPD for 2020-21, and Manfred Becker is taking over the master's program in Cinema Media Studies for that year. And then the GPD situation will be looked at again, and a GPD search will go out. There are just a couple of sort of announcement-related things I wanted to discuss with y'all before in the recorded session for other PhDs who couldn't be here, and then we'll open it up for discussion in a bit. The first thing I want to do is point to some program requirement changes. I'm going to do a share screen, and find the right document. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your continued patience. Oh, okay. Sorry, folks. Just give me a moment here. My computer's I've got a spinning beach ball of death. Okay, here we go. Okay, sorry, thanks for your patience. Okay, so as part of every graduate program has official program requirements that are passed through FGS and through Senate. And some minor changes were made. These have been discussed at previous grad council meetings, and most of them have been in response to requests from students. The first big change is that you can see under degree requirements in red here, we now have a formal methodology course called Advanced Methods in Research in Cinema Media Studies. That's going to be taught in the coming year by Janine in the winter term. Any students who want to take that as a catch-up are welcome to. And certainly it will be open to first and second year students. The idea is that ordinarily it would be taken in second year, but depending on our numbers, we may only be able to offer it biannually, in which case some first years may want to take it. It'll be in the winter term, and I think it will still feed into people's studies. The second major change is that the comprehensive examinations have formally now include the syllabus option. We've been doing this informally, which is sometimes something that happens in grad programs, but we now have approval for this. So your comps can be in the form of a 3-part essay or a 2-part essay and a syllabus. I had been discussing with people a proposal we had on board to shift the oral examination of the comps to the dissertation proposal phase. However, at the grad council meeting that we had, there was some pushback and a desire for more consultation with students who've taken the comps to see how valuable the oral process has been. So that's something that Janine's going to undertake this year and talk to students who've completed the comps process, even some students who've completed the degree, and try and get a better sense of what would be the most useful thing in terms of the oral examination component. So that's a summary of the formal program changes. I'm going to just scroll down a little bit to the milestones. And these are changes that have been proposed. This document, the PhD Handbook, does need to be approved at the next grad council. So this is a draft document, and look forward to any feedback from you on changes that would be made. The major thing that we've been talking about for several years is getting students through the comps process so that they can get to their dissertation dissertations sooner. We've heard from students that a lot of problems have been around clarity on that, both with students and with faculty. And also the program, in a kind of counterintuitive sense, they wanted the program to be a little bit more vigilant and policey in ensuring that deadlines are actually kept to. So we tend to take a light hand in our program, but we will be more, or the idea is that we want to be just very clear about the expectations, and then if your situation dictates a different situation, that can be negotiated, but at least we'll have clear expectations in place. So the idea here is that ordinarily, students will complete their comps and defend them but no later than the first term of third year. Now, I want to say right now, some of you haven't completed your comps and you're in that situation. Do not freak out. All of this is setting expectations, but anyone who's already in the program, the idea is to work with you to try and move you along in the process. So no one's going to be kicked out of the program for failing to meet the milestones. Don't worry. But that will be the expectation. And what we have in the PhD handbook is that we have in the middle column what's called definition of good standing. That means this is the minimum expectations we have for you to progress through your degree. And if you're not there, there will be a check-in to see how you're doing. And sometimes students are just finding by second and third year that they're really not enjoying the PhD. And sometimes that's a signal to move on. But that also may be a prompt for the GPD to talk to the supervisory committee and see why they're not talking to the student enough. So the last column is recommended timeline. And this is if you want to finish your PhD in 5 years, this would be the track to be on. Understanding again that everyone has different timelines and situations. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but that was the major thing in terms of the timing, was moving up the expectation of the PhD, of the comprehensive exam, to finish by fall of the third year. We're also emphasizing in the handbook the good things that happen when you're done your comps and have your dissertation proposal approved. It means you're then a doctoral candidate, no longer a student. That also makes you eligible for Fieldwork Cost Fund and Research Cost Fund. It makes you eligible for the PhD tickets, the course directorships that come up. We have 1 to 2 per year. The other thing to think about in terms of good timely completion is that it's sometimes a factor with postdoc applications. Often postdoc adjudicators will look to how quickly a student has gone through their degree, and if they've gone through in 4 or 5 years, it sometimes can advantage an application. I'm not saying that as a guarantee, or if you've taken longer, it sinks you from ever getting a postdoc, not at all. But that's just another factor, and it's behind why we're trying to make sure that people stay on track as much as possible in the degree. And the other things that we have here is that we want to have a dissertation completion timeline in your progress reports, again, so that you are communicating with your supervisory committee on expectations. The final thing we've done in the timeline is that we've added year 6, because realistically, a lot of students take that time. And uniquely at York, because of the excellent collective agreement that allows students to teach for 6 years, that option is open. And with humanities PhDs, it's not uncommon for that to happen. So we've added that simply as something that is realistically a possibility, but also suggesting timelines within that 6th year for completion. Does anyone have any questions right now about the handbook or the program requirements part? Okay. What I'm going to do then is stop the share. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Michaela.
Yeah, I was raising my hand, but obviously didn't work. I didn't find the reactions. But so my question is, and this is probably also for PhD students that are like in their 5th or 6th year, because the official timeline of the PhD is 4 years, right? That's what also, if we get fundings, usually it's for the 4 years. So that my question is, and because I'm an international student, so my tuition fees are much, much higher than Canadian ones. are there any stories of people who have finished by year 4? Because it's about financing. It's not about whether we can manage, but at some point it's the question whether I can afford paying an international student fee yearly. So that's my question, whether, and what are the options for applying, because basically I would need another 20K a year to get to pay my tuition fee, right? So what are the options there?
Absolutely. So we've had one student complete in 4 years. We've had a number of students complete in 5 years, and then we've had, I would say, the majority of the students complete by year 6, and a few have returned to defend. I would note that all of the international students we've had in our program who've finished have finished within the 6 years, and some have finished within 5 years. And it's because of the prospect of international tuition fees that have led to that. Now keep in mind, those of you who are international students, you will be given TA work in your 5th and 6th year. And because of that, you're also getting the supplement from CUPE that helps pay for the extra tuition. So in theory, international students who are funded aren't disadvantaged in terms of the higher tuition, insofar as that is covered by the CUPE contract. But where this really hits international students is if you finish and then you have to come back to defend, and you have to pay even part-time tuition for that term when you come back to defend, that can be very expensive. And that's why all the international students who finished have done so on time or within the 6-year period. Does that answer your question, Michaela?
Mike, I had a question about the extensions that FGS is granting because of COVID. If maybe you could just briefly talk about how that might work for some of us. Sure,
that's coming up on the agenda for sure.
Oh, sorry, apologize.
No problem. Anything else about the handbook?
We just, I know, Michael, you spoke about the international, but the domestic, how long does the scholarship cover usually? Is it 4? I thought it was 5 years, but is it 4 years?
No, it's 5 years. So the way this works is that the province funds a PhD program for 4 years. So the university gets funding for 4 years. Because of the collective agreement at York, graduate or PhD students can get up to 6 years of funding, but that's paid for by York. The fellowship, the graduate fellowship, which is the base funding, is given to PhD students for 5 years. And then in the 6th year, the funding comes only in the form of the TA for the fall and winter term. And then in the summer term, what we advise students to do is apply for the CUPE PhD completion fund. That's a pot of money that is divided amongst all the students who apply for it. And it fluctuates. This year, a lot of students applied for it. So the amount was about only 2,600, I think. But in some years, it can go up to 5,000. So that's the timeline for funding. York gets money for 4 years, you get money for 5 years, and your TA contract extends into your 6th year. Oh, go ahead, Janine.
Yeah, just Mike, do you want to say something about the Susan Mann Award?
Thank you. Yeah. So there are a couple of other things to think about in terms that are meant to incentivize early completion. The Susan Mann Provost Award is, you can apply for it in your 4th year. And if successful, what it provides you with is what you would have earned as a TA in your 5th year, but you don't have to work. So basically, it's a funded 5th term with no work requirements, and a lot of our students have used that to complete their dissertations. The only downside of it is that because you're not in the priority pool in 5th year, you don't get TA work in a 6th year. So basically, it becomes an incentive to finish in your 5th year. So that's something to apply for in your 4th year. And there's information about that in the handbook. The other thing I'll mention is that if you think you can finish in 4 years, there's something called the YPDF, or York Postdoctoral Fellowship Program, that you can apply for in your 4th year if you're completing, and that basically sets up the possibility of a postdoc in your 5th year. with more funding than you would have gotten as a PhD student. So those are again are mentioned in the handbook. And the last thing I'll say about the handbook is that it is a draft, and we're looking for feedback. I've already gotten some from people like Caroline and Allison, and we're looking at other documents. We're trying not to replicate everything that's on the FGS website, and so we're trying to keep it program specific. But any suggestions for things to add or subtract, please let us know.
Mike, I have a question. Is the completion fund only available in the summer term?
No, the completion
Okay.
fund has been adjusted now because some students take a leave of absence. Or
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
can apply at any term where your last term wouldn't be funded.
That's correct.
Okay.
I had a question too, I guess. How is this handbook going to be distributed? Will it have kind of like a stable online home, just like a place we can always go back to, and when we have questions, kind of go through that first before we ask the GPD and other colleagues?
Yeah, good question. So some of this information is going to be on the website, and so it's updatable. The reason we need to have it in kind of a stable PDF form with a date on it is that things like program requirements and the milestones we want to have there for a particular cohort. So what ordinarily happens is that the PhD handbook that's in place when a student enters the degree, those are the kind of expected regulations that apply to you. And I realize some of you have not had a PhD handbook to refer to, and that's something we're trying to correct here. So the idea here is this will be a PDF that will be available on the website for download. Elements of it will also be available through the website. And there are other things that students have asked for that are more difficult for us to do, partly because of the limitations of WordPress. So for example, we want to have lists of who the students are, anyone who wants to have their picture up and a description of their research. But the way it's organized right now on our website, it's like a massive scroll. And if you're at the end of the alphabet, good luck. So that's something where maybe students could take on a kind of parallel website that would be a way for you to promote your own work in a way that would work outside of the limitations of the FGS York web architecture that we have, the platform we have.
And so when you say the website, do you mean like the Cinema and Media Studies website?
Yeah, the graduate program
Okay.
in Film and Cinema Media Studies website.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, so let's move to the FGS announcement on the COVID-related extensions. So I've been following this, and it's been a kind of, as with everything in this, it's a bit of a moving. Well, the university has been adapting as best it can under the circumstances, and there are a lot of players. The provincial government provides the funding. York University has to try and find a way to move that through. And as well, under the current budgetary model, it's the School of the Arts, Media, Performance, and Design, or AMPD, that controls budget, and FGS controls the academic regulations. So that's been the other factor here. So here are the things that are in place right now. I don't think this is going to apply to anyone, but as you're finishing your degree for the next year, I believe you have 60 days rather than 30 days to complete a degree in a term and not have to pay tuition. But I don't think that's going to apply to anyone here. The enforcement of degree milestones has been relaxed at FGS. In other words, there are some things that are university related, and no one's going to be kicked out or Fs immediately put on transcripts until the crisis is over. The other thing is that current SSHRC award holders may get extensions of get a one-term extension, in other words, an additional term of funding, if you can demonstrate that your research has been delayed by COVID. And in most cases, this is around access to labs, field work, travel, archives, and so on. But the way that's going to work is that SSHRC will directly be in touch with you if you hold a SSHRC award. So you would want to respond to them directly. keep in mind that if that's the case, it may affect, if you're getting CESB, the COVID student funding, that may be affected. So if you have questions about that, it would be good to talk to the awards people at FGS. I think they have some knowledge of how that's working. And the last thing in terms of COVID extensions, academic extensions, is that any student who would be in a position of finishing in summer 2020, fall 2020, winter 2021, or summer 2021, basically in the next calendar year, could apply for an academic extension. In other words, if you're in year 5 or year 6 of the PhD and wanting to complete and you need more time, you would petition for an extension into part-time status. You would not pay tuition, and you would apply to AMPD for either a bursary or RA funding to try and help you out. But we're talking maybe $1,000 a month. And this again applies only in cases where the applicant demonstrates that their progress has been delayed for COVID-related reasons in terms of access to labs, fieldwork, travel, archives, or medical, or actually if you've been sick with COVID, or delayed due to some other circumstance. You make the argument, and FGS would back you up. So that's the extent of the COVID-related adaptations that I'm aware of right now. And I'll try to answer questions, and if I can't answer them, I will bring them to FGS for clarification. So any questions that I can bring back to them? Claudia.
You don't have to answer this now, but maybe just raising it so if you want to take it offline, or Janine, whoever's going to be. But I didn't get that email from Shirk, and I think it's because I'm currently on a leave of absence. So I need to know if I'm emailed them, and I haven't heard back. So I just need to know if I'm eligible for that extension, because I'm currently not getting anything. Like I'm not getting SEB, like I'm not getting anything. So
yeah, I think in that individual case, I'd say
yeah.
I would talk directly to Shirk, and your case in particular is complicated. So
yeah. So if I don't hear back from Shirk, can I email one of you for additional support there?
Yeah,
thanks.
sure. Slouch?
Is there a deadline that we need to apply? So I'm in 4th going on 5th. So should I apply now for the deadline or the fall, or is there a deadline for that COVID extension?
So the COVID extension is basically connected to your completion. So my understanding is that you apply for it as you're nearing completion. So you have up until the summer of 2021. If you are going to be completing in that time, then you would start your application for that. So I think realistically, if you are nearing the end of your dissertation and have a sense that you've got working towards a final draft and you can see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, that would be when to talk to your supervisory committee and the GPD about when a good time to apply for that extension would be.
Okay, just wondered if there was a deadline now or okay.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think that these are the kind of, the devil's is in the details sometimes, and these are the things that they're trying to work around.
Thank you.
So, sorry, just to kind of
Go ahead.
dovetail off that, you're saying kind of if you're nearing a final draft, that is when you would sort of be thinking about the extension. Yeah,
and again, this would only be if, remember, so all of you have, according to FGS deadlines, 18 terms to complete your degree, and you are funded either through fellowship or TA funding for 17 of those terms. So the application to extend your degree only comes if you know you need an extra term after the 18th term.
Right.
So if you're in 4th year and you think you may be finishing in your 5th year, you're actually fine. And this wouldn't apply to you.
Thank you.
Anything else on the COVID stuff? Okay. The library, man, talk about the cardinal sin in crisis planning is that you always under promise and over deliver. And they have been promising curbside delivery for library stuff for like 2 frickin' months now. And finally, we've heard that as of June 29th, curbside delivery of some library material may be available, and they still don't have a website. I've been looking. So anyway, that is the last COVID-related update to give, is that library materials will be made available to students probably after June 29th. And if you need access to campus to get something from the PhD office, or if there's a lab you want to access, then there is a formal procedure to apply for that. I would do it through your supervisor, especially in the case of a lab. For access to the PhD office, you can just, there's a form to apply for. And if you're in that situation, just let us know. I went up about a week ago and it was so deserted, so sad. Okay, last thing I'll put in the recorded section is just an update on TA work in the coming year. So as you've all learned, the plan is for the fall, everything is planned to be online. And for cinema media studies courses, I think we're presuming that almost the entire year is going to be online. And this is, even if the city and the campus opens up, we want to be sensitive to people with health issues, people who would ordinarily have traveled to the campus by now. Some of the incoming students haven't wanted to commit to coming to Toronto and paying rent here if they're not going to be in classes in person. So anyway, basically count on online. So a couple of things to be aware of. We're going to be talking to the course directors who are supervising TAs, supervising you, and making sure they're aware of this, but you may need to also remind them. First of all, in your workload forms, there's an expectation that the training you need to undertake to learn how to teach online should be at least part of your TA hours. I'm just pulling a figure out of the hat, but let's say 10 hours at least of time for you to take online courses at the Teaching Commons. There's a ton of resources out there, but there's an acknowledgement that that's part of your workload that's added for this year. We are fighting to keep tutorials in kind of as small as possible. There are different regulations around how many students would be in an online tutorial versus an in-person one. We don't want COVID to be an excuse for all the tutorials to expand to 40 to 50 students. So we're trying to keep the numbers down. Keep in mind that there are a lot of budgetary issues, budgetary pressures on AMPD, given that most of their funding comes from undergraduate enrollment and no one's really sure what's going to happen in the fall, and numbers generally are down. So anyway, there may be some shifts as we come along, but the point is to try and be prepared as much as you can. There are lots of sort of central resources through Teaching Commons, but there may be things specific to film teaching that you want to band together to help yourselves on. If any of you sort of wanted to form a TA study group, maybe talk to Janine about that. Maybe there's a way in which we can find some way to compensate you for that, even if it's only as part of your workload hours in your TA assignment. Last thing, there are discussions amongst the Film Studies Association of Canada about making sure that we can access films in our teaching. It's a big legal issue, and the changes in the copyright law, or the legal challenges around copyright have meant that it's a really kind of wide open field. So the FSAC is trying to create a statement that will allow for us to screen films in password protected, sort of basically if you screen something on Moodle, that would be protected. And for you to be able to show clips and the ways in which that will happen using classroom technology. So hopefully you'll be getting updates on that as well.
Michael, can I ask a question? For those of us that are teaching classes that require access to either hardware or software that the students may not have on their own, are there provisions to give them some kind of access to what they need? So I'm talking about studio-based classes here.
Actually, this is where Manfred, where's Manfred? Manfred may have some insight here, as he's having to deal precisely with some of these issues around the studio classes in the MFA program.
Yeah, we don't know yet, because it depends whether Toronto will enter phase 2. We know that insurance is secured till the end of the year, which is important. The equipment can at this point not be taken out. So we are waiting for the university, following directives from Queen's Park, following directives from Ottawa, to see if there's a gradual opening, but there's nothing concrete or announced. What is it you specifically would want to know about?
For the class that I'm TAing, it's access to cameras, audio recording gear, also software. So things like Adobe Suite, which is available in the labs, but which most students don't have on their own.
Right. Yeah, we've been trying to get answers, and whenever we go upstairs, we get a shrug and a frustrated, we wish we knew, because of the amount of known unknowns, never mind the unknown unknowns. They're just taking it 1 week at a time. And as Mike pointed out, we don't even know how many new enrollments we will have so we can validate TA positions. So all I can say is be hopeful, stay tuned, carry on, and we will let you know as soon as we know more. We are in the same boat as you are.
Yeah, I was going to say, Michael, if you're TAing in media arts, for example, it's really the professors are right now in the process of trying to figure out how this is going to work. I know for media arts, we are projecting that there will possibly be, I'm trying to be as, hesitant as possible, but some in-person meetings of small groups. And so our area is really working at creating safe environments, but the course directors will be in touch with the TAs as we figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
I want to emphasize there's lots of uncertainty about what's actually going to happen in your tutorial assignments, but you can be assured that you will have a TA assignment, and that's a condition of your admission letter. So don't worry in terms of the funding, it's coming, but just be prepared for possibly some uncertainty around what's going to happen in your tutorial, and you may need to really communicate with your course director, because this is, for them, it's going to be the first time teaching an online class too. So if you think of yourselves as a teaching team who can help answer each other questions and support each other, I think that's going to help a lot. Aaron?
Yeah, kind of to that end, I know I brought it up in the faculty or the department meeting, but I'll bring it up again because teaching remotely, just you have to redo almost all of your assignment outlines and everything. And so I wanted to advocate again for faculty members to do maybe a little bit more participation grades than they have in the past, and some things that are not as intensive on the TAs. Maybe some quizzes, some viewing quizzes, different things that can be marked by the Moodle systems, like different things, just because trying to grade 50 papers online is going to give people headaches. It's just not good for them as well. And then just for me personally, it takes me twice as long to grade something online as it would in person. So just advocating for some assignment, I don't know, some input, I guess, from students, but also from faculty to be aware of the actual workload on the other side of it.
Yeah, and I'm seeing Kate's thumbs up, and those students who have been in the 1700 and the current online courses, we're speaking to the course directors about ensuring that workload is more reasonable in the coming year. Allison.
I was going to talk about something else, but just to kind of say that I TA'd on the biology of story course this past year, which was entirely online. One advantage, if the instructor uses Turnitin, is that there are some kind of shortcut things where you can actually just click a button and say, think about your paragraphs or whatever, it's just got a whole bunch of pre-programmed things. So there's a tiny bit of trade-off there. So look into whether Turnitin is going to be used in any online paper being submitted to Moodle. It's built in. The other question that I had was, given that I'm going to be teaching my own course in the fall, is it possible to kind of find out what the conversations are around software and support for making because we will obviously be doing some video shooting and editing. And I was wondering if there's anything that's already kind of established for the department.
Thank you. Yeah, and so that's a good reminder for us to loop you in. We're always dealing with communication issues in our program. We have 1 million listservs that we try and keep updated, but those PhD students teaching tickets often aren't part of the listservs that are receiving information about teaching common things, for example. So we'll make sure that you get looped in there for sure. And I see Janine is already making a note, so she's on it.
And if any other folks have advice for example, open source online editing that they really like, that they've used, that they've found that students have had a small learning curve on, please let me know. I'd love that.
That's great.
Yeah, I really want to loop you into the conversations that we're having in media arts, which are all about that. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So I've got Emily Collins and then Michaela.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking this in light of current events, and I'm not sure if it's on the agenda after this, but I'm wondering if there will be any sort of maybe more widespread and mandatory anti-oppression training for teaching. I'm not sure if this, or any just sort of inclusive protocols or information that could be given to us. And I don't know if this was offered, and I kind of just missed it in the previous years. So yeah.
That's definitely our next agenda item. And there have been some things that have come out from the university. Just a question, does anyone here get an email on Wednesdays called York University Wellness Wednesday? Okay. So that has been something that I think it's been going to faculty and staff, but that has had a number of resources specifically to that question. I'll forward that to you, but we will get into that in the next agenda item for sure, because it's a really urgent issue that we've been dealing with. Michaela?
Regarding the TA-ships, I have a question, and then also 2 labs. So the TA-ships for next year, when do you know when we will be actually informed what we are teaching, what courses are there, etc., etc.? And second question is regarding the labs, because my research creation majorly depends on access to the CineSpace and to high tech. So I heard that Patricia was telling me that it's very probable that CineSpace might open in September. Is that correct? Because I need to plan my whole PhD according to that.
Right. So two issues. One is in terms of the TA assignments. We've obviously been delayed because there have been so many adaptations in terms of the teaching. It's still ongoing. So the TA assignments haven't been completed yet. Again, if you've TA'd already, you have right of first refusal, unless you've been doing it for 4 years. So if you can keep doing the one you're doing. And if you have a request for a different one, you can make that request to Janine and also Kuwei. And then we have the discussions around how to do that within the collective agreement. So we will try and get that information out to you as soon as we can. And the issue of planning, absolutely, you're trying to plan your research, but you're also trying to do it in a situation where planning is difficult because of so many contingencies. Again, Manfred may know more about this. I think the plan is if CineSpace is available, we want to get in there. And there's been a lot of demand for faculty, especially to get access to research spaces. You can imagine in science and engineering and biology, I mean, basically people have lost years of research because samples have died. And, those of us doing lab work here, it affects us as well, but we at least have more stable objects. I guess what I'm saying is that as soon as we're able to do that, we will. And this is where specifically for your dissertation research, try to be in touch with your supervisory committee and your supervisor and make sure that they can help you as much as possible there. And again, if you're not getting any response from them, that's when you talk to the GPD and we'll try and do a nudge.
Yeah, just while Manfred could also speak to that, we had a CineSpace meeting, and so they're following provincial guidelines in terms of reopening. But the assumption is that following those very strict guidelines, CineSpace will be reopened. And I know that Patrizio is very keen to get going. So I imagine that you will have access. Manfred?
Yeah, it's true. You have 3,800 beautiful square feet of space, which allows for social distancing up to 60 feet, never mind 6. And there are 2 entrances, and they will open, CineSpace itself as a facility will open that studio for us if York says it's okay and opens to a certain degree. So there are all kinds of possibilities, and we're already talking about bringing equipment down there. So that's really on an upside. The other thought I had is Tim Hampton is running these remotely interesting workshops, and I've been keeping an eye out if there's something for TAs to work with online grading, online TA-ship. And I don't know if you get those updates, but if I see anything, I'll pass it on, because that would be a possibility to be proactive and equip yourself for what's about to come.
Yeah, a lot of these resources are online and will be available. But as in the nature of all webinars, somehow sitting through an hour-long webinar can also be really tough when there's like 3 nuggets of information you're going to extract from the experience. So anyway, any other questions about that stuff? There's one other thing I wanted to have recorded before we go to the rest of the discussion. Any other questions or comments?
Mike, I just had a question about TAing, because I know I did one of Jillian's online classes in the fall, and I had 100 students between 2 tutorials. Is that sort of where you guys are leaning? Because I know you said you're trying to cap and not have too many students, but I was surprised how many I had, and that was a lot of work, just to kind of echo Aaron's comments before.
Yeah. So there we have to go, since that's an online course that preceded COVID, and those are the numbers that are given by the Dean's office, what we have to do is reduce the assignment load. But unfortunately, the 100 student, that's what we've got with the Dean's office, and they're under such financial pressure. We're not going to be able to convince them to take fewer students. So what we need to do is make it less work for the TA. But unfortunately, I don't think we can reduce the number of students. The only thing that may happen is we may simply have fewer students. And so you may have fewer students just because there are not as many people in class. But yeah, it's a problem.